As the voice for business in Oklahoma, each year the State Chamber advocates for policy here at the Capitol to make sure that Oklahoma is the best place in the nation to start, run, and grow a business. Better reading scores and a better environment for innovation. Those are the headlines of a 2026 annual agenda designed to make our state more competitive on the regional, national, and world stages. This session, the State Chamber pushes forward our first agenda guided by Oklahoma Competes, a framework launched in the fall of 2025 following an in-depth national analysis of Oklahoma's economic climate. The plan, designed to make Oklahoma more competitive in 4 key economic fundamentals.
Good news is on economic climate and infrastructure, in those 2 buckets, this legislature and these leaders over the last few years have done some tremendous work in those areas. On the education and workforce development and innovation and entrepreneurship, there's work to do there. And that's where a lot of our agenda for this year is going to focus on those areas.
Literacy and education anchor the 26th agenda. Oklahoma currently ranks 49th nationally in 4th grade reading scores, a statistic business and legislative leaders say must change for Oklahoma's workforce to compete in a modern economy.
You have to learn to read so that you can read to learn. And statistically it shows that if students are behind in the 3rd grade, they're statistically likely to be behind in middle school, statistically likely to be behind in high school, statistically likely to be behind as an adult. And so if you want the very foundation of how do we move the needle, not only in education, but when you talk about economic development, you talk about public safety, you talk about incarceration rates, generational poverty. How do you break those cycles? Well, it starts with better education, and you can't have better education if kids can't learn how to properly read.
The Chamber's agenda focuses on bills that will increase literacy coaches and tools that will benefit both teachers and students.
We've got to get this right, as the speaker said. As the chair of education, it is my job to champion what education can do for all kids, and I do believe it's the tide that lifts all boats. You're going to see a focus from both chambers in the legislature on ensuring that teachers, from the time they become teacher candidates in College of Education, are trained on the science, the brain science, the neuroscience. What we know now is the discipline of science of reading. So that it's all aligned, so that when a teacher candidate becomes a certified teacher in the state of Oklahoma, they show up prepared from day one in an early childhood classroom.
I think education is the absolute number one thing right now. Securing our workforce so that we can move forward and be competitive nationally, internationally, that's the key.
The agenda also prioritizing another key fundamental, innovation and entrepreneurship, particularly involving Oklahoma's lab-to-market pipeline.
If you look at solid, robust economies around the country in states that have really flourished, they've done a great job of partnering industry and capital along with ideas and innovators that are in the educational system that can come out ready to go.
We have a very outdated technology transfer guidance statute. This legislation will simply update and modernize that guidance so that we can aid Oklahoma in being competitive.
And we've got to turn these great research universities into companies and into jobs in Oklahoma, and that's what we're going to do.
Expanding research and development capacity across both public and private sectors is another key component of the State Chamber's 26th agenda.
If we want to compete globally, we've got to focus on research and development, and it's got to be a partnership for the nation, for every state that's competing, for institutions of higher education, for private industry, for our own national security. We have to have our aerospace and defense companies involved. We got to have energy involved. We got to have biosciences involved. It's a team sport.
If we are going to be competitive and we are going to encourage a new opportunity in any industry, we have to make sure that we have the tools in the toolbox. Most of the research and development activity is in the private sector, but we know that higher ed is so incredibly important. It is a critical piece to this whole package.
The agenda calls for continued progress in tax policy and incentives, building on recent reforms that have moved Oklahoma from 39th to 19th nationally in tax rating. In particular, stressing incentives that must be treated as strategic public investments and align with statewide economic goals.
Because of our size, it can be difficult to fund very large expansions and those sort of things. So getting some support from the state it's immeasurable. It's just so valuable. And unfortunately, if Oklahoma doesn't offer those sort of incentives, other states do, and they'll do it quickly.
Current statutory criteria focus heavily on individual incentive performance, not on how incentives align with Oklahoma's economic strategy. And without these reforms, Oklahoma risks spending tax dollars on initiatives that do not increase competitiveness, wages, or long-term economic viability. Oklahoma has an enormous amount of incentives and incentive packages. I think it's vital that we figure out whether or not the juice is worth the squeeze.
Just like any business, when we make investments, if we're not getting a return on it, we have to do something about it. We can't just let it go on forever.
You're not going to solve the literacy crisis overnight. You're not going to solve the innovation problems that we have or the GDP problems overnight. It takes sustained effort over time, and that's what we're here for. We're going to be very data-driven in it, and that's what Oklahoma Competes is all about, of making sure that Oklahoma is putting in place the things that are going to make us competitive now and in the future. But you've got to start somewhere, and so this is the year that we're going to really lean into that long-term thinking about how to grow Oklahoma.